Welcome to AskPsychSessions with Marianne Lloyd, where we ask some of the best teachers we know questions from you, our audience. If you have a question or an idea for a conversation, please visit bit.ly/AskPsychSessions. That's bit.ly/AskPsychSessions. All one word, all lowercase. And here's our next question.
Thank you for joining us. Today, my guest is Dr. Katie Kroeper from Sacred Heart University. Thanks for being with me today, Katie.
Thanks for having me.
As usual, I like to give our listeners a little bit of backstory on our guests so they understand where you're coming from. So if you could tell us a little bit about your training, and then if they don't know where Sacred Heart is, maybe a little bit about what Sacred Heart is like and what you're teaching.
Yeah, sure. So again, I'm Katie Kroeper. I'm a social psychologist by training. So I study social identity, I study threat, I study social psychological interventions to reduce identity threat by changing contexts. I have my BA from Rutgers University. I earned my PhD at Indiana University, working with Mary Murphy. I just did a postdoc at Ohio State with Steve Spencer and Ken Fujita. Now I'm a brand new assistant professor at Sacred Heart University, located in Fairfield, Connecticut. So first semester there. In terms of teaching responsibilities, so right now I'm teaching social psych, so study of how our thoughts, feelings, behaviors are shaped by others. And I'm pretty excited about this. It's going well so far. I'm also teaching political psychology, so applying psychological principles to the political realm. So we're talking about lots of fun stuff like partisanship, polarization, media, misinformation, conspiracy theories, and extremism. So Sacred Heart, I'm really loving it so far. It's a teaching-focused institution, supports faculty research endeavors. So for somebody like me who loves teaching and research and does research on teaching, it's kind of the best of both worlds.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations on your position and getting into the first semester. And I think we'll, if we have time, maybe come back and talk a little bit about pandemic job markets and things. But I want to make sure I get to why I called you. Or let's be honest, emailed you, which is that I read your essay on the APA Teacher Network newsletter, which was about, I think a lot of us are pretty familiar with this idea of growth versus fixed mindsets for you, but you have some pretty cool stuff about why the professors, in our case for college, or the teacher for high school or younger, their mindset can actually also make a difference. So could you tell the listeners a bit about that work, please?
Yeah, sure. So as you said, this work is an extension of classic mindset research, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with Carol Dweck's mindset theory, but I can briefly summarize so that everybody's on the same page. Mindsets refer to people's tendencies to be traits like, usually we study intelligence, but it could be applied to athleticism, personality. So the extent to which people view these traits as either malleable, so changeable, or as fixed and therefore unchangeable. So people who tend to endorse more growth mindset beliefs think that human traits are malleable and can be changed through effort, flexibly adopting useful strategies, seeking help when you need it. Whereas people who endorse more fixed mindset beliefs tend to think that human traits are rigid, they're unchanging. You either have that trait or you do not have that trait. And these mindset beliefs are important because they often predict people's responses to challenging circumstances. So let's say you're a student in a challenging math class, you get the results of your exam and you didn't do well. If you have a fixed mindset about math, you think my math ability is fixed, I can't much change it. So the setback, this bad grade, is likely to demotivate you. You think, I'm just not a math person, so maybe I should just turn my attention towards something else that I'm actually good at, like writing or history or whatever the case may be. But if you have a growth mindset about math, you think, I can grow my math skills, I just need to work at it. So the setback, this poor grade, can be motivating. You think, I just need to do more studying. I should seek help from my teacher, try a different strategy. So that's classic mindset research in a nutshell. And until quite recently, most mindset researchers treated mindset as an individual difference variable. So we focus on how the beliefs of students influence students' own academic motivation and achievement. And intervention efforts, in consequence, were focused almost exclusively on the students. So how can we persuade students to adopt growth mindset beliefs and discard their fixed mindset beliefs? And if teachers were involved, it was really to train them on how to persuade their students to change their mindset beliefs. Researchers weren't much focused on the mindsets of teachers. So the innovative part of my team's research is that we treat mindset as a cultural variable, so not simply an individual difference variable. So what do I mean? We look at how contexts and cultures signal and perpetuate mindset beliefs, and we look for ways to change a fixed mindset culture into a growth mindset culture by shifting the cultural norms, the values, the policies, and the practices. And one thing we've learned along the way is that the actual and the perceived mindsets of teachers, of professors who are leaders and culture creators in the classroom environment dramatically affect students' feelings, motivations, and achievement in the classroom. You might be noticing me say we a lot. So I do want to shout out all the people who work on this. So give credit where credit's due. I'm part of a fabulous research team, community of scholars spread out kind of all over who study mindset at the cultural level. First being Mary Murphy at Indiana University, who is my graduate advisor, as I said earlier. She's been a leader and a key player in this area of scholarship. She really pushed the field to think about mindset at the cultural level. So my work on this topic was co-developed and produced with her. You know, there's also many other collaborators, Katie Manx, Elizabeth Canning, Anita Rattan, Doreen Green, Audrey Fry, Elise Agbadu, Heidi Williams, Shahana Ansari, Rashad Al-Rashid, Jenny Lacoste, Julie Sievers, Julia Iying, Steve Spencer, Ken Fujita, Laura Wallace, Ariana Hernandez-Colmenares, so many fabulous folks who do this work. And it's really taken a community, and I'm very grateful for mine. But I can talk now about the research. So why do teachers' mindsets matter to students? Why should we intervene at all at the level of the teacher? So for a few reasons. First, a teacher's mindset informs their teaching practice, which obviously has a direct effect on students' experiences and their learning outcomes. There's some great work by Inkiri Rissanen's group and Kathy Sun. I haven't worked with either of them directly, but their work shows that growth-minded teachers, so teachers who believe that their students can grow their intelligence and ability, tend to engage in a certain suite of teaching behaviors. So they engage in frequent one-on-one interactions with students to build close relationships with their students. They avoid comparing their students to other students so that students are using their own progress as a gauge for how well they're doing in the class, not comparing themselves to others. They provide honest, critical feedback, but in the form of not yet. So you're not understanding this concept yet, but you can if you do X, Y, and Z things. And they foster students' process-focused thinking. So praising their courage, use of new strategies, and their effort. Now, conversely, though, a fixed-minded teacher tends to encourage students to demonstrate their abilities. So they emphasize the importance of earning a high grade, getting that A in the class, focusing more of their attention on the high-achieving students, presumably because focusing on the low-achieving students is seen by these sorts of teachers as a waste of time, a waste of resources. And we know from classic self-fulfilling prophecy research what these teacher expectations can actually do to students then. When teachers hold high expectations of their students, most students work hard to meet those high standards. But when teachers hold low expectations, well, students tend to flounder. So teacher mindset influences a teacher's teaching style, but we've also found that students can quite deftly pick up on these sorts of cues. So they observe a teacher's behavior and they come to a conclusion about their teacher's mindset. Perhaps not using that academic terminology, but they get the sense that there's a culture of safety in the classroom when their teacher seems to have a growth mindset, or conversely, there's a culture of threat in the classroom when their teacher seems to endorse a fixed mindset. So, you consider this particularly from people, from the perspective of people with marginalized identities in the classroom. So if you're a physics student from a social group often excluded from or negatively stereotyped within physics settings, like Black, Brown, Native students, women of pretty much all races. And imagine that based on a particular student's observations of their professor's teaching, they think their professor has a fixed mindset. So they think their professor believes that some students have this special it factor and other students don't. In that type of a classroom, it would be reasonable for students to suspect that their professor also believes that certain groups of students, like those traditionally advantaged in STEM settings, white and often Asian men, have more ability than groups that are traditionally stereotyped in these settings. And this is exactly what the research shows. So one study led by Elizabeth Canning showed that when a hypothetical calculus professor was described as fixed-minded, male and female students, but especially the female students, inferred that the professor endorsed negative stereotypes about women's math ability. But when that same calculus professor was described as growth-minded, viewing STEM abilities as improvable with effort and learning strategies, students were less likely to infer that the professor endorsed gender stereotypes, and students instead inferred that the professor expected all students were capable of putting in the effort, adopting strategies needed to be successful. And there's many, many studies like this, like David Yeager found that a direct-to-student growth mindset intervention only seemed to improve students' end-of-year math performance if students were also interacting with a math teacher who endorsed growth mindset beliefs versus fixed mindset beliefs. And I love this. In their discussion, they use this fabulous analogy of planting a seed in either fertile or infertile soil. So growth mindset message is that seed, and it's better able to take root in the minds of students, the soil, when there are compatible messages coming from leaders in that classroom context, like their teachers. So to continue the analogy, the plant needs fertilizer, it needs water, it needs sunlight in order to grow. Merely planting the seed is not enough. So the growth mindset teacher is that fertilizer, is that water, is that sunlight. And work led by Katie Minks shows that students who tend to interact with fixed mindset teachers report less belonging, greater imposter feelings in the classroom, and these things predict lower course engagement, less interest, poorer performance, all of which are outcomes that should really trouble teachers who are in the business of educating students. So that was a lot of context. Sorry, Marianne.
It's lots of good information that people can decide where they want to bounce kind of from. And I think what I'd like to ask is sort of like if you listen to this and you're like, oh no, I think that I'm accidentally more fixed than I thought. I thought I was so gross.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm doing this. Is there like one or two easy things that you can put into place in your classroom that you might not have thought about doing? Now, I'm going to predict that probably most people listening to a teaching improvement podcast, they themselves have growth mindsets and perhaps bring them in, but maybe we could always be better. And I think what you said about marginalized identities and stereotypes, kind of that broader, the way those can be influencing, I think is also really important, right? Are we accidentally sending growth mindsets that are still, rooted in stereotypes in some way? So
right,
kind of
totally.
How are you thinking about it? Maybe you can just talk about for your classroom, like what are the key things that you did to get off to a great start in your first semester?
Well, these are great questions. And to your point about how most people listening to this podcast probably tend toward the growth mindset, I would agree with you, but I think it's important to recognize that, no person is perfectly growth-minded all the time. Like fixed mindset is deeply embedded in the culture that we live in. There are fixed mindset messages everywhere. So sometimes it's easy to let those creep in to your own mind and into your teaching practice. So it's okay if that happens sometimes, as long as you're trying to, consistently infuse your teaching with the growth mindset. So I just want to give that disclaimer, like it's something that we should all care about. No one is perfect, But there are things that you can do, as you said. And this was actually a great transition to the work that I actually did. So far, I haven't really described that at all. But we were interested in like, how exactly do professors signal their mindset beliefs about intelligence to their students? What are those behaviors, statements, course policies, et cetera, that communicate mindset? And we did a bunch of focus groups, and we found that there are really like 4 big things that instructors can do. And one is to deliberately communicate to your students that they are all capable of success in your course. So this is something that's, I think, very easy to do at the beginning of the semester when you're maybe talking about your course syllabus and saying like, hey, here are all the things that are required of you. This is what, comprises your grade. But, I just want you to know, I believe that you're all capable of being successful in this course. And we all come to this course with different experiences, different knowledge, and I'm here to help you get there. And the second big thing is providing students actual opportunities for practice and feedback. So of course, there are things like student drop-in hours, office hours that you can invite students in to get that sort of feedback. But you should think about, are there ways that you can structure your course that has those feedback opportunities built in? So one of the cues that we've looked at is, whether the course only has like a midterm and a final exam, or these high stakes assessments that are the only way that students get feedback about their progress. And students tend to perceive that as more of a fixed mindset cue because they're not being given opportunities to kind of fail and recover from that failure. So you can think about, for example, one of the things I'm doing this semester in my political psych course, there's a final term paper. And there are many assignments along the way across the semester where students can kind of gauge their progress. So they first need to write a synopsis of what they want their paper topic to be about and potential research questions that they can investigate. I give them feedback on it. It's a pretty low stakes sort of thing. They submit an outline, get feedback from their peers and from me on the outline. They do a first draft where they get feedback from peers, second draft where they get feedback from me, and then the final exam, final paper is due. So building that feedback into the course structure in ways that students can see their progress and, get advice on how they can improve along the way kind of, tells them that you really care about their learning and mastery. And it also lowers the stakes a little bit. So students feel more comfortable failing and they know that they can recover from mistakes. Another big one is offering emotional and practical support to students who are struggling, right? So if a student comes to you and they're like really having a tough time with the course, one way you could handle it, probably the fixed mindset way to handle it, is to say, not everybody's cut out for this field, right? Kind of having like a little resignation about it. Or you could respond with frustration that I explained this to you so many times, like, why aren't you getting this? Like, no teacher should do that ever. But, there are some ways to handle, student struggle. The other is to say like, show them reassurance and support. So like, yes, this is tricky. Let's talk through it. What's another way that we can look at this? Have you tried this strategy? Have you tried that strategy? Have you sought these resources? The fourth thing that we suggest is explicitly valuing learning and development in your course. So saying that the goal here is to learn, being very explicit about that in your words. And like I said, you can do that in your assessment strategy as well. And do that over valuing things like brilliance, flawless performance. Like, it's very easy for us in the classroom when somebody just like gets it right away for us to be like, you're so smart. And you give them that feedback right away. And it's almost, very quick and automatic, but you're sending a message to the students in doing that like, you're only smart if you get it right away, quickly, without repetition, without feedback. And that's not the message we want to be sending to our students, if we're really valuing learning, growth, mastery.
Fantastic. Thank you. Now I feel like I need to go back and reread, because I feel like so much of what you're saying feeds into, I read Powerful Teaching and Inclusive Teaching both this summer. And I feel like maybe some of why some of that stuff works that are in there sort of fits in with this. It's like, how am I messaging and how am I allowing them that space? I have been trying, that was one of my goals for this semester, was to ask a question, but not let anyone answer for a while, because it shouldn't just be the person who can retrieve quickly.
Right.
It doesn't tell you if you know either, which is hard for me, because there's so much fun to be had. And I like knowing that they know something, right? Because it's reinforcing to me. It suggests that they're learning in my class, but that wanting everyone to know what they know and don't know doesn't just give them metacognitive feedback, but suggests that I'm interested in the learning process. So thank you for those ideas. And those are nice, clear things that you can bring in.
I have a little game for you if you're interested. I could put you in the perspective of one of the participants in my studies.
Ooh, yes, please.
Okay. So in one of the studies, we showed students a cue. So something a professor either did or said in the classroom. And as quickly, but as accurately as they could, they were tasked with categorizing it as growth-minded or fixed-minded. So I have some of those cues for you. And you tell me what you think most students said, and I'll give you the answer. Okay.
Fantastic. Okay. I'm ready.
So first one.
And I just have to say growth or fixed. Do I have to say mindset too? I don't know when we're recording from onset of my vocalization or from completion.
You can take growth or fixed. That's fine.
Okay.
So a professor recommends online resources that supplement course content.
Growth.
Right. And 94% of our respondents also chose growth-minded there. That was a straightforward one. How about, and that's because providing feedback, providing resources signals a belief that students can learn and develop. Otherwise, why would you provide those things in the first place? Okay, this one. To struggling students, the professor says, mistakes are opportunities to learn.
Growth.
Growth, yes. And this time, whopping 98% of our respondents chose growth-minded. For that teaching behavior cue, it shows support, reassurance to the struggling students. How about this one? Professor encourages struggling students to drop the class.
Fixed.
Yes. Here it was actually 100% of students categorized that as a fixed cue, because the professor is suggesting, even if it's not what they intended, that they don't believe the student can succeed in that class. This one, I think, requires a little bit of clarification, because I can imagine, some professors thinking, oh, I haven't encouraged a student to drop a class before. So am I never supposed to tell a student to drop a class? And no, of course not. I think there are situations where that's the right thing for the student. They may be overloaded with courses. Maybe there's something going on in their life that's distracting them from their studies. But I think what's important for instructors to know that this is, a sensitive issue, right? So potentially with mindset implications for them and for the student. So teachers should tread carefully and think well, if they're going to encourage a student to drop the course, they need to be mindful and, kind of give it some context. So I want you to know that I believe in you, but I can see that you're struggling. And for that reason, I think it might not be the best time for you to take that course. That said, I hope that you will, sign up for this course again in a later semester, provided that you address X, Y, and Z things, whatever the circumstance might warrant. So that was a little game. I did give you some softball ones, but what we found, we had almost 120 of these cues, and for 80% of them, student consensus was 90% or above. So students are pretty much in agreement about a lot of these cues, which is interesting, exciting. We've done this with college students. We've also replicated with Cameron Hecht with a sample of middle and high school students too. So it does seem to generalize beyond the college context.
That's great. It's nice to, hear that what we're saying is having an impact, right? So if you are, at least this semester, I feel like energy has been higher again, but there have been, sometimes you can feel like, is this making a difference? Are we together? So it's good to know that people are picking up on that, and what you're saying does make a difference. So that's great. Thank you. I love a good game show.
Yeah.
So maybe with our last few minutes, do you want to sort of say anything about having been on the job market during some pandemic-y times, postdocing during pandemic-y times, any sort of growth mindset that would be helpful for people that are having interviews, or just things people may not have thought about, right? I haven't been on the job market since 2006, so it's been a minute.
Yeah. I think my experience was, as far as pandemic goes, I think things turned out pretty well. One thing with the postdoc that was, a little upsetting was I never actually got to really go to campus. It was a fully remote postdoc. But I think, everybody that I interacted with did, so much to make me feel included. Even though they weren't on campus, we did a lot of outdoor outings, like everybody getting together in that way, which was really nice. But, the postdoc, you tend to feel a little isolated because you never really fit in with the grad students 100%. You don't fit in with the faculty 100%. So it's already a little bit of an isolating experience. And then also to just be sitting at home. But, all things considered, I think everybody did everything they could to help me feel included. In terms of job market stuff, it was a weird time. So when I was interviewing, people had in-person interviews, but everybody was masking. I know a lot of people had completely remote Zoom interviews too. And, that it's tough over Zoom to, always connect with people. So I can imagine that was quite hard for people who had to endure it. But I was lucky in that it was in person, although masked. I don't know if I have great advice for people, just because I know each person's experience is so unique. But I guess one thing that kept me positive during it was I knew that, no matter what happened on the job market, the PhD gave me marketable skills. I'm somebody who knows how to talk about research. I'm somebody who can write, can do analyses. So, although my goal was to get a faculty position somewhere, I knew that if that didn't work out, that would be okay. And that took a lot of the pressure off of me, which I think ultimately may have helped. So I just want people on the job market to know, you have so many marketable skills, and you should talk to people in academia, but also in industry, and know that you can land somewhere great, even if it's not where you thought you'd land.
Your fixed mindset advisor thought was the only place that one should end up after being trained by them, perhaps.
Right.
Well, great. I do try to always leave a little space at the end if there's something that my guest would have liked to have talked about and I didn't happen to leave them there. So is there anything you'd like to share from pretty much anything? Katie, the floor is yours.
Sure. We're so excited about future directions for this line of research. So obviously, one thing we want to do is plan teacher-focused interventions and test whether educating teachers on how to communicate growth mindset beliefs in their words, their policies, their practices. We can create growth mindset cultures that benefit students. But also in there, I'm very interested in this idea that I'm calling counterfeit growth mindset, which is, so if you're a teacher who who endorses fixed mindset beliefs, you truly think that some students are capable and others are just not capable, and you're being pressured to do all this growth mindset talk in your classroom, how does that actually work out? You might just go along with it, but does your fixed mindset leak through? Can students pick up on that? Is it just as good as the authentic growth mindset? So I'm interested in that. The other thing, and we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier when you asked, when you said that probably most people listening are likely growth-minded teachers. We're interested in these like ambiguous cues or mixed messages that students get, right? Because not everything a teacher does or says necessarily has any mindset content at all. So what do students make of that, those behaviors that don't really communicate mindset? But there's also certain behaviors that could communicate both things at the same time, depending on how the student interprets it. So one of the cues that we looked at that I was surprised we got a lot of mixed responses on was professor posts student grades, de-identified on the classroom wall in rank order. I think 75% of students said that was growth-minded. And initially, Mary and I and Audrey thought that would be a clear fixed-minded cue because the professor is literally rank ordering students. But, then I thought about it a little bit more and I thought, well, you could see it as the professor saying like, here are students and here are my high performers and here are my low performers. But, another way you could, I guess, construe it is thinking that this professor thinks that this is motivating for me, that I can change my position in this list, perhaps. So I was surprised, but generally there are some cues that can be taken either way. And the question is, what is leading some students to view it one way and other students to view it another way? Is it, that they're using their own mindset as kind of a lens that's, tipping them? If they're more of a growth-minded person, are they, giving their professor the growth-minded benefit of the doubt? Or if they're fixed-minded, are they going to lean towards fixed-minded? Or is it that they're viewing this professor's behavior in a larger context? So are they borrowing from other things they know about the professor and, making meaning of that and using that as a lens to view the unclear behavior? And one thing that I'm really excited about with Katie Minks, Elizabeth Canning, Julie Sievers, we've actually collected some data, and I don't want to give spoilers or anything, but we've collected some data to look at professors who do actually communicate mixed messages. So like they say something growth followed by something fixed, followed by something growth. And the question is, do students, view this linearly? Is there a linear relationship between the amount of growth-minded things a professor does and the perceptions that students have of that professor's growth mindset? Or is there like a fixed mindset tipping point where like, okay, a certain number of fixed things have been said, this professor is fixed, and you kind of write it off this way? And I don't know if I should give the spoiler because I know the answer, but maybe I'll require you to invite me. Give the spoiler. Yeah,
no, don't give the spoiler. Ask people to give you a talk, give a talk in the department, or present it at a conference and encourage people to go, especially if it's October's ACT conference in Pittsburgh or NITOP or.
Okay, well then people will have to invite me to give a talk if they want to hear about this, or you'll have to invite me back, Marianne.
Yeah, this is great. I want to sort of mull it over in my mind. Yeah, fantastic. Well, again, thank you so much, Katie. This has been a delightful chat. I appreciate you taking the time, and I wish you a very successful first semester and beyond. I've been talking with Dr. Katie Kroeper at Sacred Heart University. Thank you. Listeners, did today's episode make you realize you have a question you would like someone to answer? I would be happy to take it into consideration and find a guest that can help. But what I need you to do is head over to our Google form at bit.ly/AskPsychSessions.